Hi everyone. In this bite-sized bit, we're going to work through the mechanics of creating a brand new project, manipulating our very first form, and adding some simple controls to that form. We're also going to talk about naming conventions and simple property manipulation on our form. Let's go ahead and get started. In previous videos, we've worked through the mechanics of creating new Visual Studio projects. We're going to go through those steps one more time very quickly. I am creating a new project from scratch, not opening a project that already exists. And we could go through the choice of C# for our language, Windows for our platform, and find the appropriate template. But because I've gone through this exercise before, you can see that one of my recent project templates that is listed on the left-hand side is what I'm actually looking for, a Windows form app in the .NET framework. I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of this recent project template that's on the left-hand side of my screen. And then I'm going to go ahead and click Next. Because I'm creating a very simple form for today's exercise, I'm going to name this project Boon TED Simple Form. I'm going to choose a location better than the C drive. In this case, I'm choosing my in-class folder. And I'm going to leave all of the other defaults. Whenever we create a new project, we're always going to go through the same 3 steps. I'm going to rename the form file inside my Solution Explorer to something descriptive that starts with a lowercase frm. After hitting enter, I'm going to choose yes to change the code behind the scenes to reflect this change. And then I'm going to click on the form object on my screen, and in its text property in the lower right-hand corner, I'm going to change it to something more descriptive that can also look pretty. We've now created our new project, and we've gone through the basic steps of getting our form ready for manipulation. For the remainder of this video, we're going to be discussing adding simple controls to our form. And the place where we find these controls is in the Toolbox, which is a tab on the left-hand side of your screen. If you open up that tab, you'll see a list of a variety of different types of controls. For most of this class, we're interested in common controls, so I'm going to click on the little triangle next to common controls to expand this menu, and now you can see all kinds of different choices that we might be interested in. Because I'm going to be manipulating these various controls for the next couple of minutes, I'm going to take advantage of the Auto Hide Thumbtack button that is in the upper right-hand corner of this toolbox. When you click on this thumbtack, it will keep this particular window open on the screen even when I move my mouse away from it. If you click on that button again, the toolbox will show up on your screen, but when you move your mouse away from it, that toolbox will disappear. Because I'm going to be spending a little bit of time with the toolbox today, I'm going to go ahead and at least temporarily thumbtack it to my screen. There are lots of different controls that we can manipulate in Visual Studio. Today we're going to play around with 3 of them. And the first one we're going to manipulate is a label. I want to add a label to my form. And there are 3 ways that you can add controls from the toolbox. One is to click and drag a label from the toolbox onto your form and place it anywhere that you'd like. The other way is to click once on the label and then bring your cursor over to your form. You can see the cursor looks like an A, and that represents you're about to add a label, and then click wherever you want to add that label. The third thing you can do is you can double click on the toolbox, and it will add a label in the upper left-hand corner of your form. Once you've added an object to the form, you can drag it around the screen any way you'd like, and you can manipulate various properties of that object. This is a label, and what we're interested in most of the time for our labels is changing the text property. So down in the Properties window for this label, I'm going to change this label's text property to student name and a colon. And I'm going to hit enter. And I'm going to place this label towards the upper left-hand corner of my screen. I'm not going to worry too much about exact placement. That's something we can worry about after we've created our entire form. Let's go ahead and add 2 more form controls. The second one that we're going to add is a text box. Unlike labels, text boxes are meant to be input and or output opportunities for our users. So labels are on the screen to describe something, and text boxes are on the screen to provide additional information to the user or collect information from the user. And you can see they look a little different than a label. They have a different background, they have a different border, and they're actually going to be very different in terms of their behavior when we write our code. For text boxes, we typically want to modify the name of this object. We typically don't modify the text property. So if you scroll up and down your property list, you will eventually find name in design, and you want to change that to something more descriptive. I'm going to change this to TXT, student name. Notice the first three letters are TXT, and then every word afterwards starts with a capital letter, student and name. No underscores, no dashes, no funny characters. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. That's going to be the name of the code behind the scenes for describing this text box. This text box is going to be aligned with our student name label, and there are many ways that you can align a control with another control. In this case, you can see the blue line at the bottom of student name aligning with the bottom of my text box. I can also get the top of the student name to align with the top of the text box. I can also get this interesting magenta line, and what that is doing is it is aligning the text in the student name label with the text that will eventually be inside our text box. Our text box is currently empty, but eventually there will be text in there. And that's typically what you want, is the text aligned with the text. You'll also see if I move this text box close to student name, I get this little tiny horizontal line between student name and the left-hand edge of my text box. That's what we call a gutter. There are gutters that appear on the edges of your forms, like so. And there are gutters that appear between various form controls. And those are suggested minimum distances between your various objects. I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of the magenta guideline and that small horizontal gutter suggestion for my student name and the text box that's going next to it. I can also change the size of this text box, and I'm going to make it a little bit wider to accommodate larger names. The third control that we're going to add to our form is a button. I'm going to go ahead and drag that onto my screen. You can see I'm going to line it up with the left-hand side of my text box, and I'm going to use the vertical gutter line to put it just underneath my text box. We're going to change two things about this button. In the properties window, we're going to change its name to btn submit. And then we're going to scroll up and down our properties until we get to the text property. And we're going to change its text property to submit. You can change the name property for the label. But unlike buttons or text boxes, which are always going to be manipulated by code, labels are often static. They're on the screen to provide information, but we don't always manipulate them with code. So for class purposes, if your label is static, it only exists to provide information, you don't need to change its name. But if you did want to anyway, the naming convention for labels would be LBL and then something descriptive. In this case, student name. That's it for this exercise. In the next exercise, we're going to talk a little bit more about how we can manipulate code behind the scenes for these objects that we just created. See you next time.